Little Horse and Big Conversation. Welcome to Little Horse and Big Conversation, where we give them their say, let the horse guide the way. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, we have the choice, so let's give them a voice. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, Little Horse and Big Conversation.
Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the Little Horse Big Conversation podcast. You're here with me, Ross Cooper, and my co-host Amy Mitchell. And today we are pleased to welcome another special guest. We have Yasmin Stuart from Yasmin Stuart Equine Physiotherapy, the founder of the Modern Centaurian Academy. Yasmin, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honour to be here.
So you have got quite I think we'll start off by maybe just going over a few things that you have under your belt, because you're not just a physiotherapist.
No.
So before we allude on to all the other skills that you bring into your work, because this is something that I'm going straight into because I think it sets you aside in your work from a lot of other physiotherapists and body workers. What is it that first prompted you to think about physiotherapy as a career? Did it come organically, or what was the background to that?
It did come organically. My first proper job, proper in inverted commas, I was a freelance groom at a commercial livery yard, and I had a series of accidents in a 3-week period, all horse related, all, when I reflect back on them, completely avoidable, but a series of accidents that essentially meant that I couldn't walk after. I had such horrible back pain that I couldn't walk, and I was about 18 years old, and off the back of that I found myself at a chiropractor's clinic, and he was a trained radiologist, and he x-rayed my back and he diagnosed me with a compressed and herniated disc and degeneration of my last lumbar vertebra. And he said, oh, and by the way, you're never going to ride again. And, you know, from what I understand of imaging now, getting that diagnosis through X-ray was pretty shady. But also, when I wound up at his clinic, you know, 4 weeks prior to that, I was walking and I was completely fine and I had no pain. So for me, it was kind of insurmountable that I was now in a situation where I struggled to walk and I would never ride again. The things I was diagnosed with seemed relatively chronic, albeit I was in acute pain in the moment. So that pushed me down this huge rabbit hole, if you like, of exploring different movement therapies and manual therapies. And I eventually found myself with a remedial sports therapist, and he essentially, with a combination of bodywork and movement therapy, primarily yoga and weightlifting, he got me to the point where not only was I pain-free, but I was moving the best I had ever moved my body. And also, through going through that whole experience, it built so much more infrastructure around me. I was going to the gym, I was going to yoga classes, I was meeting new people, and my life kind of broadened and expanded. And at the yard that I was working at, they were primarily interested in classical dressage. So already from an equine perspective, I felt that I was scratching a biomechanic itch. At the time, I thought I was operating on the pinnacle of correct biomechanics, whatever correct means. But I was interested in it. And it dawned on me through all of this process that I had gone through with my own body and pain, and recognizing that even if I wanted to move well, pain would limit me. And so I needed strategies to get me out of pain, whether that was different movement patterns, whether that was body work for myself. But it made me think our horses, we can do all we can to help our horses, but if there is pain there, they're going to need help with that first. And so that is what triggered me to do my diploma in equine physiotherapy and rehabilitation. And then it's just basically been kind of pulling the threads from there through different avenues that have kind of found me to the point that I'm at now.
I think that's really cool because I think it gives you a level of empathy that unless you've suffered in that way, I don't think you can. And the having gone from being in that what you were told was going to be chronic pain for probably the rest of your life, to then actually being able to recover from that, and as you say, moving the best you ever had, that must give you a kind of a different outlook on horses and how we can help and improve them than someone that's come at it without that kind of personal experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say there have been many things. So I've been qualified now for 10 years, if not a little more. And even recently, I've had some health things going off. And one of the things that cropped up within that was a diagnosis of hip arthritis, which was really interesting because it was the health things that precipitated me moving less. And then in moving less, my perception is that I've lost muscle mass and stability around my hip. And then that has precipitated something that's been there probably for a very long time, probably a large amount of my life, but because of the loss of muscle mass, that's flared that up. And what was really interesting to reflect on with that particular piece was how the discomfort in my body manifested in different ways emotionally for me. So the pain was different depending on factors that had happened throughout the day. But not only that, my response to the people around me would differ depending on the discomfort that I was feeling. And that discomfort could have been anywhere from, if you touch me, I'll bite you in the face, to, maybe I should do a bit of exercise. And if I move, that will free it up, to, well, I can move, but just not in these planes. And that really made me empathize with horses. When I think about a large aspect of my job is determining where the discomfort comes from. Yeah, for me, the pain was definitely in my hip, but if anyone touched me anywhere, even like a hand on my shoulder or anything like that, and it would make me incandescent with rage. So yeah, definitely I think the empathy piece is really important. And I also think what's really important to recognize with horses, and I think the same can be true for people. I think some people try to make it a feminism issue, but I actually just think it's how people relate to pain in general, that we can really diminish pain, our own pain, but also our horse's pain. And I think that's really sad, because I think it says a lot about how we feel about ourselves and how accepting we are of ourselves.
Yeah. And I suspect if you look across different cultures, there's probably actually quite a difference with how, compared to us as a sort of a Western culture, how that manifests.
Yeah, and I wonder as well, I think as a Western culture, and then I also think of how much of a movement there is towards personal wellness. And then I think there is a disparity in different generations as well. Some generations that would be, well, we just suck it up. And on one hand, I admire that. And then on the other hand, I feel sad for that, because I think it's sad that we don't have the support and infrastructure around us for if we are feeling painful. There are people around us, or even our own self-acceptance, that says it's absolutely fine if I'm not as productive as I would be on any other day, because I need my body to rest. But also if we bring this back to horses, looking at how horses are used, and horses started off life for us in being sort of workhorses, whether that was going to war or whether that was carrying goods, or if you look at third world countries where they're not afforded the luxury necessarily to think about their horse's pain because they are busy using their animals to kind of keep food on their table and a roof over their head. Whereas I think for us, if we have horses for pleasure, I think recognizing their pain and doing something about their pain is really important. And also, it's not really an excuse anymore. We know quite a lot about recognizing pain in horses. So that, for me, that means we need to be held accountable. We know it's there. We need to be held accountable to it.
I've just been making some notes because there are obviously, as you will know, multiple threads that I would like to pull at. So there is something that you said a few minutes ago about your pain levels on the day and your response to people around you. Now, I do want to draw a parallel with horses with this, and I love it how you already know where I'm going. Did that vary depending on the person? I know obviously it would vary, of course, depending on the level of pain and discomfort you was feeling, but would that vary depending on the person around you? Because we know from observation of equine behavior and how our horses interact with people, they feel safe to express or safer as a whole to be heard around different people. So I wondered from your experience, if there's any parallels for you.
Yeah, I would say a never-ending quest of mine is how can I communicate differently with the people around me and better so that I can advocate for my needs in the moment without it having more emotional hysteria than absolutely necessary. But what I would say was that when I was experiencing more discomfort, I was definitely less tolerant. Now I was able to vocalize my lack of tolerance and say, this is where I am at emotionally. And, my husband was brilliant about it. But I did notice, if we're looking at the kind of the mindfulness gap between the stimulus, the trigger, and the response, as much as I'm quite good at capturing that pause and saying, I don't like this, or this is how I'm feeling, I can articulate it, and yet that doesn't take the emotion away. And I would say broad spectrum for me, when I am experiencing anything, I am less tolerant. So I'm not necessarily going to sit there and cry about it or like limp and oh woe me, but I can definitely feel my stress bucket's quite full, and it does not take much for it to overflow.
Yeah, individual capacity.
Yeah. And then, from that perspective, if we were to compare that to a horse, recognizing that they might be trigger stacked, for me, that would be trigger stacking. Personally, I'm in discomfort, and that is a significant trigger. And then anything else that comes in is just going to be adding to that. But with horses, it's exactly the same. And then we've got to look at recognizing that and then recognizing what is fair, reasonable, and possible to be asking them. And I think from an equine physiotherapy perspective, that's really important, because oftentimes I can be invited out to work with someone's horse, and they want exercises to do with their horse to strengthen up different or strengthen up different muscles and relieve different compensatory patterns. But if we have a horse that's in pain and trigger stacked, whether that is just because of the pain or because of insufficient lifestyle and other factors involved, poor saddle fit, hoof balance, lack of understanding in a training perspective, we need to be really mindful about what we ask them to do. And in a lot of circumstances, in my opinion, it's not appropriate to train them in the moment, and we need to work on the infrastructure before we then go in to train them. And that's actually something that I think a lot of people find really difficult to get their head around, when you're telling them to perhaps do a little less with their horses, but maybe learn about how their horse communicates with them, and get some infrastructure in place before we do the training, whether that's working on the hoof balance or sorting out environmental things. And it's interesting how people can find that quite challenging. I think it can feel like being much, but actually we're honouring the horse's threshold. Also, importantly, we're not doing more to put them in a chronically stressed situation if they're already chronically stressed. And I think this is something that a lot of
It's like looking at what we are giving them as opposed to what is being taken away.
Absolutely. And there's this phenomenon, I think it's called additive solution bias, which is where we all feel so much better adding stuff. We're optimizers. We want to add more so that we firstly feel like we're controlling the outcome. But also, when you do less, it feels like you're doing less towards your goals. But for a lot of people, well, in fact, pretty much everyone I would say that I work with, if we give them enrichment, if we tell them to work on their environment and we get the hoof balance right, actually doing less means the horse's posture naturally just unwinds. And then that means that we have a really cool neutral to work with when the time is right. Whereas a lot of people, I think, they're starting below ground zero. Whereas if we can get the infrastructure in place, we can get them to ground zero, and then they're just training the horse rather than having to manage the horse that's in pain in a suboptimal environment, which might be triggering them. And yeah, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I like the way you phrase that because I think that's got, I mean, me and Amy have had this conversation a few times on the podcast about how we have, as a species as a whole, we sometimes struggle with self-awareness and self-recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that draws direct parallels to what you've just said.
What do you mean by self-awareness and self-recognition? How does that come in from an equine perspective?
In the sense that how are we to provide environments, situations, and the right setup and meet our horse's own needs when we can't provide that for ourselves because we don't have the awareness or recognition because we've been so conditioned.
Yeah. I would look at that like having the self-awareness when I'm turning up to my horses and thinking, what are my stress levels like today? Even things like, have I eaten? I know we talked about that before we came online, but have I eaten? Because I know personally, if I haven't eaten regularly, and I'm like a, 3 meals a day kind of gal, and I don't really snack between. But even then, if I've had breakfast and then I see the horses around lunchtime, and it's been quite a while and I haven't eaten when I come to see them, I can find myself a little more reactive if I was to let myself kind of, if I was to not manage how I showed up with the horses, I could feel myself being reactive, which means that I need to, recognize my own self in the training situation, and how the horse is responding in a way that I wouldn't like might provoke me to react in a way that I wouldn't like if I wasn't aware of how I was showing up in a training setting. That felt like I went all around the houses with that one, but I hope it makes sense.
It did. And I think you've just touched on sort of that emotional discomfort,
Yeah.
which we, again, are very poor at reading with horses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think we're poor at reading it with horses, and we also take it like a personal attack. When the horse doesn't do the thing, I think we are so conditioned to respond to everything that a horse does with a correction and take it personally, because if we can't make the horse do the thing that we want them to do, then that's a reflection on us as trainers, or, you know, however we are showing up with horses. And I think that's something that I don't believe. I don't think that's how we should reflect. It's all like little data points that we, and
Yeah.
what I think is really interesting is how we can also take how the horse responds to us as a personal kind of, I was going to say attack, but like a personal affront depending on our lived experience as well, and how we associate with how other people interact with us as well, and our previous history of other people too. I don't know
Yeah,
whether I've made any sense.
no, I think that's a very valid point. Yeah, and I know myself, like this last week, it's been a week leading up to having a couple of weeks off, and my body always, like, I go at 100 miles an hour, and then it goes to those last few days, and although my brain is still going at 100 miles an hour, my body suddenly goes, yeah, you're really tired now. and and I know that has a knock-on impact for the way that horses respond to me. And I have to be very conscious of that and aware of that, and try to, make a point of kind of centering myself before I start, taking my time throughout the trim. And yeah, I think that sort of awareness of how these things that are happening inside of us have such an obvious effect on the horse, and being able to pinpoint that and be aware of it and acknowledge it. And sometimes you can't counteract it. Like sometimes you're just having a day. Well, I know for myself, I'm having a day when my body hurts and I'm tired, and I'm not. It doesn't matter what I do. I'm not going to be projecting the same as I do on a day when I'm feeling amazing and good. But it's that awareness of that, and then how you deal with the situation as a result. Do you find that the horse is more snatchy, so therefore you get annoyed with the horse? Or do you think, nah, he's being more snatchy. I kind of understand why this is happening today. So I'm just going to give him his foot back, and we're just going to take a moment, and then we're going to start again. Or do we go, actually, you're being an arse. I'm going to hang on to your leg, and
Yeah,
you have a choice in how you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that level of self-awareness does mean that you can manage how you show up in a situation, or if you show up at all. And I also appreciate, Amy, when you're trimming horses and you've got a trim cycle, you can't just go, oh, not today, because then you've got to put them in somewhere else, and it's that maintenance care that they need. But I definitely agree. The luxury that I have now is that having a whole array of different tools in my toolbox, I can also pull out the tools for when I'm feeling tired or sore. Much like I can pull out the tools for when a horse is feeling more reactive or more whatever on any given day. But the lesson that I learned most poignantly with my old horse Falcon was, I remember I had a farrier out to him, very good technical farrier, who was in a lot of pain. And so what he would do was he would pick the foot up, he would take the shoe off, he would keep the foot in, up in the air while he took the shoe off, trimmed the foot, pulled the foot forward, pulled the foot backward. And meanwhile, Falcon's there, like clinging on for dear life, like, dear Lord, please put my foot down. And I'd be saying, okay, he really needs his foot back now because he can't sustain this. And the farrier is getting really stressed and upset because he's sore and it hurts moving from position A to position B. And I could really see the toll that had on Falcon, but also in clinging on with tenterhooks also took a toll for my emotional regulation watching all of this unfold, and also the farrier in front of me, who was significantly less tolerant as a professional than who I really want to have kind of circulating around my horses. And so with that in mind as well, when I'm working with clients, leg handling is something that I do quite a lot, because you can have really cool postural effects just from picking a leg up with a bit of mindfulness and placing it back down with a bit of mindfulness. And so being able to say, okay, we're going to pick the foot up, balance ourselves, couple of swipes of the rasp, I'm going to put the foot back before the horse snatches, because I know that I'm feeling weak and sore and whatever and tired. So if I put that foot down first, I'm already starting with the horse knowing that I'm going to give back before they're even in a situation where they feel the need pull. And I find that really helpful. But oh my goodness, having that level of self-awareness and sort of monitoring your own behavior whilst also monitoring the behavior of another being. I think it takes quite a lot of it's quite a lot of energy, going into that entire situation. And then when you're feeling depleted, sometimes you just want to get the job done as well. So I don't envy you in the slightest, but I also think it's awesome when we're seeing professionals who are aware of how they're showing up too, because it helps the horses as well.
Yeah, it definitely does. I always find it quite interesting. One thing that I always try and do is to ask the horse to pick its foot up, and then I wait for the horse to make the decision itself to pick the foot up. And I always find it interesting the number of owners that I've had my hand on the horse's leg for about 3 seconds, and the owner's going foot, 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 pick up the foot, like it's fine, it's not a problem. Just just let him pick it up in his own time. If it takes a couple of minutes, I don't care, because I just feel like if you kind of like what you're saying about putting the foot back down again, like if you get the horse on board in the first place by it being their decision to lift the foot up, that they haven't been coerced into it, you're starting off, no pun intended, on the right foot, rather than already starting with a I've got the power over you kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think giving them time to think about their foot and then pick their foot up, but also giving them time to rejig their body around. Like I
Yeah.
don't know about you, but I meet a lot of horses where you can ask them for their foot and they're like, oh my goodness, here's my foot, quick, have it. And you're like, dude, you're stood like a
Yeah.
wonky shopping trolley. This is not a sustainable
100%.
posture.
Yeah. This is
Um,
never going to work.
yeah, so how about we just think about the four corners of the box, and if you need to shuffle around, that's absolutely fine. Rather than it being like obedience above all else.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Something you said earlier about having more things in your toolkit now.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate on that? So, and I think this is, so obviously I know you pretty well. Um, but for anyone listening, I think what you're now going to talk about is why I reference you not being a standard physiotherapy, and what I would say is taking the bar higher because of how you approach your body work, specifically so from a consent based approach, but with everything else that you've integrated into your work as a body worker. And this is something that I think we may have had a chat about this a couple of weeks ago on some of the CPDs I've been to, which have been more bodywork focused. It's always really interesting to observe how a large group of people can have a lot of knowledge about the body, but not a lot of recognition of how to read the body within the responses of what they're doing. And I think obviously this is something that you do very well.
Thank you. I guess the sort of the most pertinent place to start would be, when I did my equine physiotherapy diploma, that was traditional equine physiotherapy, and I don't mean that to be derogatory, but very much we do the baited stretches and the poles, and we'll watch the horse move, and we're looking for a head nod, hip hike lameness. We do the massage, the passive stretching, and then we do prescriptive exercise off the back of it, unless we feel it's a vet referral, in which case go to the vet. But by the way, a vet referral is only really considered in the context of a head nod or a hip hike lameness. So that's quite a broad scope for a lot to be going on in the horse's body and not a lot to be recognized within that. Like I think about the scope for human pain, and there's many situations where I can be experiencing pain, but that doesn't manifest with me limping. It might just be like a grimace or a movement that I can't do. And I've already referenced that I started off my sort of equine lifestyle with a heavy bias towards classical dressage. So I knew a not unreasonable amount about training. And what was really interesting when I did my equine physiotherapy diploma and I started to understand about the muscles and how the body moved, I looked at the classical dressage that was happening in front of me. And I felt that in many situations, things were being misrepresented. What was happening in the body perhaps wasn't happening in the body. Now that I understood about, anatomical landmarks and I could watch a little bit about how the body moved, I could see that what they wanted to happen and what they were saying was happening was not in this moment in time. And that kind of got me thinking a little bit outside of the box. So, initially, yes, there was a lot of pulls and a lot of baited stretches. And then I started to find that things weren't really changing. Like what I really wasn't understanding was what the metric for success was. Because we were taught, you see the horse, you treat the horse, you give a 12-week rehab plan, and then in 12 weeks' time, the horse is fine. And the question that I had was, what was fine? And also, 12 weeks isn't really that long. And not only are we training the body, in human physiotherapy, we're training the body and we can say, do these exercises. If it hurts, do less. If it feels good, do more. If it feels really good, progress to the next level. And we can't do that with horses. We're really having to read their behavior and their body language and outsource to things other than obedience to recognize if a horse is okay. So anyway, I dipped my toe into a lot of different modalities, whether that was movement therapy or whether that was body work. And my first dip my toe into body work that was different was when I did a 2-day Masterson method weekend. And what I really loved about that was Jim Masterson, who took the 2-day weekend, was really, encouraging us to pay attention to the horse's face and look for blinks and look for licking and chewing. And I know from a behavioral perspective that can mean a lot of different things. It was the first time someone referenced how the horse felt about what was happening to their body. And there were moments throughout that weekend, particularly with bladder meridian, which is like a beautiful little staple bodywork exercise, where it was like the world slowed down when we were doing that technique. And I felt that the horse was having a really pleasant time of it. But not only that, there was something about their body. It was like the cling film unwrapped and their body sort of puffed up afterwards. Looked really beautiful. And it looked like there was a difference before and after. And then that started to create this situation where I really wanted to know where the skin in the game was for me in terms of what I was giving to people. And I came to the conclusion that I wanted to give them results, and results being that their horse's body changed, that their movement patterns changed. And not only that, but they had the infrastructure around them and the tools so that they could go and replicate that. So they weren't beholden to me as a professional coming out and making their horse better, because they could support their horse in being on their own. And then from there, it's kind of pulling different bodywork threads or movement therapy threads, and also learning more about behavior through different avenues, working with behavioral consultants, also doing a couple of behavior CPDs. And that then kind of pulled the veil from my eyes, in that I was recognizing a lot more of what horses weren't enjoying. And in recognizing more of what they weren't enjoying, that started to disempower quite a lot of my skill set, because I could go in there with the bodywork techniques and the prescriptive exercises, but I'm not the kind of person that is going to go in there and do something that the horse doesn't want me to do. And I think some of this is the luxury that, as an equine physiotherapist, I don't have to touch the horse. Like I don't have to go in there and do something. I'm not kind of beholden to maintenance like you would be if you were trimming feet or shoeing the horse or doing a dental or doing a veterinary workup. And so that really made me think, I'm not going to do something that the horse doesn't want me. But also I know that if I do something that the horse doesn't want me to do, I've seen what happens to their body. And they can shut down and they can pull themselves into all sorts of crazy compensatory plans just by proxy of the fact that they don't want to do the thing, or they feel unsafe, or they feel uncomfortable, or they feel more painful, or they don't like how you're touching them, or they don't like the level of pressure. You know, there are so many different ways in which the horse can kind of tense up and brace. And so with that in mind, it then started to, my skill set then started to morph into what could create postural change from a manual therapy perspective with bodywork technique, what could create postural change from a movement therapy perspective with in-hand techniques. And I started to recognize that those in-hand techniques and ridden techniques would have varying degrees of success depending on where the horse was at emotionally. And then that started to kind of train my eye into all of the ways in which a horse might not be able to be trained in the moment because of different things going on around them, as mentioned earlier, whether that was hoof care or what have you. So how can we influence their body by doing other things such as enrichment, where we can get postural but not tax their body that it declines? So with that in mind, that's created a very broad skill set of different things that I can pull into a session, whether that is bodywork, movement therapy, enrichment, looking at the environment, or even the human influence on the horse as well. That has meant that if we have a horse who can't show up emotionally for bodywork, we still have something positive we can do. Or if we have a horse where it's not suitable to train them, but they can show up for bodywork, we have something positive that will move the need in a direction that supports their posture and their well-being, whilst also not pushing them into a place of stress. So where this is different from sort of traditional equine physiotherapy is that I'm not just going to come out and do the thing. I'm going to look at what's influencing your horse's well-being in the moment and send you in the direction of what's going to move the needle for your rather than just come out and bodywork, take your money and leave. You know, I might be saying it's not appropriate to bodywork your horse today. Your horse may well be being obedient and going through the motions of doing this, but they are in pain and they need to see a vet. And so I'm not going to prescribe exercises for you, but I am going to support you in getting a diagnosis. Move in the direction you want. So for a lot of people, I tend to be involved when their horse is presenting quite a complicated manner, you know, like a series of nothing-y something, where we're using their posture and their behavior to them. So that's kind of an abridged version of how I got to here without giving you all of my life history of every course that I have done. But I think what sets me apart from other people is saying, no, this horse is experiencing something that other people haven't noticed, and some people don't like that. You know, some people suggest that I'm not doing anything, or some people suggest that I should just be getting on with it. And in fact, actually, I remember on one yard I got referred to as feeble. They were like, oh, she's a bit feeble, maybe you should get a sports massage therapist in. And I was like, oh, do you know, that's probably one of my most favorite insults.
Feeble. It just falls out the mouth in a really bad way.
Oh, it does, but it also cultivated the hashtag on social media, hashtag stay feeble. So, you know, we turned it into a power movement.
Excellent.
Well played.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you a little, because I think it's probably going to be a question some people will have. When you talk about using enrichment, what kind of things are you using?
The simplest thing that I will do is a treat scatter. I've got for anyone who's listening, on my YouTube channel, Yasmin Stuart Equine Physio, there's a guide on how to set up a treat scatter. So I will use that, which I learned about it through Rachel Dreismer's work. She has pioneered scent work in the equine sphere, based off of the work that she has done with another trainer with dogs. She's got a couple of fantastics as well, head in that direction if you. But essentially, scatter treats around in a trail, and the horse will smell around for the treats. The act of smelling helps to activate different parts of their nervous system, which help to bring them into a more regulated state, which also proliferates some neurochemicals which help them to feel good, and also help to support their interest in the activity. And that has been incredible for opening up different movement patterns, changing their posture, doing something meaningful with their horse when they're not in a trainable state, and also helping to downregulate their pain as well. So that's one of them. Another one that I would do is more of like a sensory garden. So hiding food in varying objects or obstacles, whether that's on like tarpaulin and blankets or, buckets scattered around the arena. So they have to go and sort of search out the food and interact with the environment around them in order to get the food. So those are the two that I rely on. Rachel Dreismer does more of a scent work where she'd like lay a scent trail, with something hidden at the end of the trail for the horse to find as well. Her work's really cool, but I've picked out some of the things that really scratch the posture itch.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I automatically have an interest in that because I have a dog that does scent work. So, But it's interesting. When I had my little thoroughbred back in the day, who was the whole reason that I ended up getting into hoof care in the first place. She, long story short, ended up on box rest for 3 months. I would never do that again. And I used to be constantly trying to think of creative things to give her some sort of interest. So yeah, I used to do things like getting plant pots and towels and just like various things of different textures, and I would tie her up at the back of the stable so she couldn't see, and then I would put all these various things out and put bits of carrot under some of them, and then let her go and kind of figure out, okay, there's a towel here, like how do I get the towel off the carrot and all this. And yeah, she really enjoyed it, but it was very interesting because she found that whole thing of being stuck in, understandably, incredibly stressful. But just seeing the way that getting her brain working and that kind of seeking behavior, you could see her down regulating as a result of it. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I could talk for forever about it. I find it fascinating. From the perspective, so my thoroughbred that is retired, she's got a lot going on with her orthopedically, and she finds having her feet trimmed quite challenging. But I have found that if we do a treat scatter before I do her feet, she finds it significant.
Really?
So just warming her body up, I think the neurochemical effect and also warming her body up and her nervous system coming down all come together to help her find it so much easier. And by proxy of that, I find it easy. But also the other thing I find interesting is learning about how horses learn by proxy of how they approach enrichment. And I think that can be indicative of their previous learning experience. So in a training perspective, a lot of people say no to their horse a lot. No, don't do that. No, do this. No, do this. Yes, that was good, but now we're going to do it better. Yes, that was good, but now I want one more step. And so, this is another reason why I'm not just going to blindly set physio exercises, because I don't want horses treated like that. I want horses being active participants that they are doing. And if I'm working with a horse and I see that really they are hating every living second of what it is that I'm doing with them, I'm going to stop and I'm going to set something else where we can get them to engage in the exercise in an active way. And oftentimes that's with enrichment. But not only that, I find if I'm using enrichment in and around the enrichment setup, so the treat scatter, for example, like with my horse, I find there are moments where she sort of checks back in with me, and when she checks back in with me, maybe it's a good opportunity to ask her to move her body in a specific posture. It's a really nice way to get some more traditional training in, kind of flying under the radar of the nervous system. And that has been really helpful in changing posture, whilst the horse has a nice time too. I think all of it for me really is, how can we get the horses to have a nicer time of it while we do human things?
Is there anything specific that you found for people listening? Because we know enrichment can cover and contribute to and have just such a wide range of positive effects. Is there anything specific that you've seen really profound changes to, from sort of, a pathological perspective, to then introduce enrichment exercises and the change that comes about as a result?
Oh, my favorite thing. From, like, if there's any body workers listening, palpate a horse before, do some enrichment, and palpate after, because they feel totally different. And the first mind-blowing moment for me with that was with at a clinic I was doing at Brandy House, and I know, Ross, you were there, and there was that little fell pony, I think, Fell or Dales, who
Yes.
had patella ligament stuff going on, and she had no stifle range of motion whatsoever. And then after going through a sensory garden with her, repalpating, and her range of motion felt completely normal. She had full range of motion available to her. And that was really cool because, we could have body worked that until the cows come home and not got that result. And yet we went through and did a bit of enrichment, and suddenly her body was available too. The other thing that I find really cool, like with my thoroughbred, I've got on my Facebook a before and after of her from last summer to December, where basically all I'd meaningfully done with her was trimming her feet appropriately and doing enrichment with her, and her body looked totally different. And so from my perspective, I'm like, she had a great time doing all of that. At no point during any of that was there any conflict. Yes, she didn't enjoy having her feet done, but we did enrichment beforehand, and I overshadowed with plenty of food. And if it got too much, we simply stopped and it was fine. But I think lots of people can train their horses and look for the postural changes that we can just create by lobbing some food on the first time of it. So those are my kind of couple of favorite things: palpate before and after, because mind-blowing. But it also tells me the propensity and availability horse has in their body that we can then work towards. We can open the movement up within, and then when the time comes, we can strengthen it and train it with exercises, whilst bringing your horse's mindset for the ride as well.
That's very cool. Yeah,
it's really cool. It's really cool. And Amy, like, for your clients, if you have anyone who struggles, particularly getting them to do like a scent work before you arrive, is, like, for me it's been like life changing, and that sounds really dramatic, but I want results and also people can do them. And also, from a human perspective, if we think, oh, I need to do something meaningful today, but I've had a really long day and I'm tired, and being able to just scatter some food around and go for a little with your pony, and it benefit their body and their mind, is just really low hanging fruit.
Yeah, it feels like something that's going to benefit the human mind as well, to be honest. It feels like a really nice thing to do.
Yeah. And I'll work on my own nervous system regulation while I'm doing it as well. So I might go through a bit of breath work, or the other thing I might do is mirror the horse as they're moving. Because oftentimes if we do any mirroring of horses, we are mirroring them while we're also leveraging getting them to move. But with scent work, they are moving themselves. And so it makes us, have to follow their body, which is surprisingly difficult when the horse is moving completely autonomously in all sorts of actions. So that can be fun.
From a personal wellness perspective, like talking about nervous system regulation, there's a lot that we can do to support ourselves, and by proxy support our horses. There's a lot that we can do with, but collectively, what do each of us do outside of our work with horses that we found actually creates quite a big difference to our nervous system, and therefore how we show up within a session? Aside from boundaries, because I think actually between the three of us, we've got pretty shit hot at working with boundaries recently. Pat on the backs, guys.
Yeah, boundaries being, boundaries mean that I can love you while loving me too. For me, I think the biggest thing, well, I don't know. There's a few. Breath work for me, and not, anything more than just being aware of my breath, counting my inhale, exhale, and noticing kind of like the area around my heart has been the biggest thing. And I can take that with me, and I've practiced quite a lot. The other thing is just having little rituals as well. So carving out just a little bit of time to myself in a way that feels nice. And I think that can sound really trite. And the voice at the back of my head sort of rolls its eyes and goes, "Oh God, you sound so pretentious."
It's not your voice, so ignore it.
No, well, it's like the other side of my brain, you know. But like a ritual would be, so of an evening before I go to bed, I'll have a shower, and I'll have a shower. I've got like a scented candle that I will have on in the bathroom, and I don't have any other lights on at the same time. So it's just the candle and the shower. And from a scientific perspective, there has been some research that suggests that if you shower in darkness or near darkness, it helps you to sleep better. It's you're warming your body up, and then your body starts to cool down, and that can replicate night falling and it getting colder. But all of that is to say, the shower happens with the really nice candle that smells nice. And it's just a nice moment where you can sit there and go, that feels really nice. I really enjoy that. Irrespective of the science behind it, I think having that moment every day that you can look forward to and go, that feels really nice, I think is a very good way to support well-being. It's just a little bit of time. And I think that is important. And then, you have a whole series of boundaries around that. If that's your one thing that for yourself each day, then that is, you're just pulling back a little bit of time in what is actually so I think those are important. A little ritual, no matter how silly or small it might seem, that one thing, and a little bit of breath work that you everywhere. Those have been the big. But what about you guys?
Amy, volunteering you first.
I'm just going to say I really like your candle shower idea. I'm having a new bathroom put in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be very like sanctuary bathroom. So I'm going to steal your candle shower idea. I love that. It wouldn't work in my current bathroom, but that in my new bathroom is going to be amazing. So thank you for that.
That's all right. It's not my idea, but steal it away.
Yeah. I mean, I've come to breath work myself relatively recently, but have found that to be massive. I can feel the changes in my nervous system as a result. So that has been amazing.
Qualified practitioner.
As of yesterday, yes.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. So I think I don't know whether I mentioned this on the podcast, but I have a massive phobia of dentists. I hate going to the dentist, and I recently had to go and have a fairly invasive procedure done, and I was terrified of going. Had put it off until it couldn't be put off any longer. And normally I would have gone to the doctor and asked for some sort of a sedative for me to be able to cope with the appointment. But I decided, right, I'm doing this breathwork course. I'm going to try using one of the techniques. And it was amazing. Like, it got to the end of, I mean, obviously I'd still had the anesthetic, obviously. But I got to the end of it, and she finished, and she said, "Oh, I finished." And I actually sat there and was like, "Oh, wow, I didn't even really notice it was going on." Wow. Because I was able to calm my nervous system to such a point and to focus just on the breath, to the point that I almost kind of totally disassociated from the situation that I was in.
Yeah. Sorry, I think Ross and I are laughing because we've got hands up.
We've had this. We've had this before. So for for the audio viewers here, when recording, if you make hand suggestions towards the camera, it changes things on the screen, and we've just had that, and it just caught me off guard.
Oh,
So, Amy,
does it?
please carry on.
I thought we had like a little spirit enter the chat or something.
I mean, maybe that's what it was. That sounds better.
Um, but but in all seriousness, coming back to what you were just saying, Amy, I think that's incredible. And also, to take such a fear response and be able to not just bring yourself back down, but stop yourself from going up to that spot in the first place. And I think that is a very important skill set for people to have. And I think it's a very important skill to have. And a lot of horses, bringing this full circle round into sort of physiotherapy. A lot of horses, their nervous system state is all over the place, but they've never really practiced relaxation. So not only have they not practiced relaxation, but they have no path to kind of get there. Whereas with breath work, we create a path for ourselves to get.
But it is very interesting, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself, how when you're able to regulate your own breathing and to slow your breathing down, the impact that has on the horse is huge.
Yeah, especially from a bodywork perspective, horses have got these huge electromagnetic fields that are capable of pulling us up out of our nervous system with how they are feeling. And so if we can manage ourselves, we also become more of an anchor for the horse, kind of magnetize themselves to, and that can keep down as well. But also if we can manage our nervous system, we're so much more predictable, which makes us a lot nicer for the horses as well.
Yeah.
What about you, Ross? What about your what have you done in terms of nervous system regulation for yourself?
So this is, as you probably both know, like one of the themes that I'm working with at the moment is embodiment. And I think I had some, again, as you both know, I had some health news at the start of May, which started to change my perspective on things. And again, it's still a working diagnostic going off, but it was enough to just make me take stock of things and go, actually, I'm not in my body, especially up to that point. And I think for you to conduct yourself with an authenticity, regardless of whether that's showing up with horses or whether that is how you communicate or the advice that you pass on to clients, I think you're not really coming from the same page, and you're not really living it if you're making suggestions for someone to do something, but you're not fully doing it yourself. And it was quite a stark recognition at that point where I practice all these things, and my go-tos tend to be yoga, they tend to be breath work. So again, for me, I find that I get energy from other people or my own energy or from horses, from animals. It gets stuck in my body. So for me, what I find really works is movement. So whether that is weightlifting at the gym, whether that is some kind of calisthenics workout, whether that's yoga, combining that with breath work, I found that to be really, really huge in being able to actually channel, ground, move it through my body. But up to that point in May, I hadn't been fully present with the experiences that my body was having. I'd been doing them and effectively going through the motions with maybe 60, 70% presence, but that's not enough. And I think that's what's changed quite a lot more so for me over the past, I'd probably say 6 weeks or so, is actually ensuring that what I practice, yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's sticking with and being okay with that level of discomfort. And actually expanding on that a little bit more, some things that I will do is if I'm really struggling to get into my body before I set up a practice like this, I will do something that very quickly brings me into my body. So I bought a plunge pool, for example, and I've started using that. And I don't put ice in it. It's outside, it's covered, it's the temperature of the water of what it is at that time. I might put a bit of cold in it if it's a little bit warmer than what I'd like, but I will get in there and I will not set myself targets. I will wait for my body to feel different and to feel settled being in there. So I'm trying to come out of that forward planning, target driven mindset, which I think has been a bit of a theme from today, and actually just be present and embodied with the experience. And if we can take that to our horses, we're on to a massive win.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we had a conversation the other day, but I've got an online academy and I do different videos in the academy, whether that is theory, work, or training. And I noticed that when I'm working with my horses, I am a different person when the tripod and the camera come out.
We only had this conversation
And
yesterday, didn't we?
yeah, I'm a different person. And what's really fun, I primarily work with my horses at Liberty now. And the tripod would come out, and it was Chelsea in particular. I'd set the camera going and I'd walk up to her and she'd go, absolutely, and walk off. And what I love about that, I love a lot about that mare, but what I love about her is her absolute calling me on my own bullshit kind of thing. And I started to work backwards from, okay, so what happens, who am I before the tripod comes out? And then who am I after? And I noticed that my nervous system just completely leaves the chat. My nervous system completely leaves the chat when the tripod comes out. And so it was looking at, what do I need to do to keep myself more regulated? And then also noticing when I am working with my horses, when my nervous system exits the chat and why. Whether it is because I've got grabby and I've got ideas of stuff that I think we ought to do, but neither of us are in a place where we should be doing it, or whether it is because I have some subliminal pressure about something that I need to be doing or some criterion that I need to fulfill. But where I was going with this is it sounds like with your health journey, and it's also something that I've been trying to embody in broader life is, where do the no's come in and why is it a no? And can we recognize when our nervous system shifts slightly and sort of pulls us back or pulls us up, or it feels like we're caught in a bit of Velcro? Can we notice that and can we do something about it before we have kind of blindly continued into this space where us and our nervous systems have parted company, and then it takes quite a lot of repair to get ourselves back together?
And it's interesting how you note repair, because I think all three of us can, but I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that feeling of being quite drained and needing the space, the time, the repair in between to feel somewhat human again.
Mm.
And I think it's very, it can be very easy to put, well, it can be quite difficult to put things in place, but I think it's harder to maintain them. Like one really interesting thing that I've been playing about with, and again, like everything, it varies day to day on my level of availability mentally and my level of regulation, is that if someone is asking me something, and it doesn't mean to say that it's anything negative, it doesn't mean to say that anyone's overstepping anything, I am very much trying to pay attention to my body's response on an energetic level. Where is that sitting in my body? And how is my body responding? And for me personally, don't know about you guys, I'll flip the question in a minute. For me personally, if someone is asking something and you have that split second of a couple of thoughts going through your mind going, okay, well, I feel I should be saying this, but actually to appease the situation, I might say this. And then your stomach twists. My stomach kind of gets heavy and it twists. And I'm like, no, I am dishonoring myself if I don't present what the response my body's giving. And again, we can do that in different ways. It doesn't mean to say that we have to be very blunt and abrupt about it, but you can honor your boundaries with the right presentation. And personally, I've found a lot of difference since being able to do that, or paying attention for myself to be able to do that.
Yeah, I definitely have as well. And I think what's really interesting is how you can think you're doing it, and then when it comes down to it, you're not. Or You know it's something that you need to do, but you feel so trapped in the construct of your life that you can't do it. And then when you do it, when you do the thing, you recognize how profound it has been for you. And it almost becomes a little bit, I think what's interesting with that, I recognize it comes with a level of privilege to be able to say that you can do the things that your nervous system needs. I know there are a lot of people, work the 9 to 5, that's probably more of a 7 till 10. And they're sort of trapped on that hamster wheel that they can't get off of. And so it feels very lovely for me to be able to say, yeah, I'm just going to do what my nervous system says it needs, whilst also recognise table and bills paid. But I do think there are little you can give back to yourself. May I go back to the shower conversation, for example, like little pauses for you to repair, when you're kind of down in the trenches and you can't make the decisions that you would like to make yourself. So, yeah.
Something as simple as a 10-minute cup of tea. Sorry to talk over you, but it doesn't need to be anything profound like a holiday or, a spa day. It can, like you say, those little rituals, creating that space within the day. I think we can, and I really appreciate what you're saying, that I think we all have very different lives, very different experiences. But there is always a little bit of something that each of us can do no matter our situation. And I think it's important that people have at least some know-how and access to that level of empowerment, even though it can be tricky to find.
I agree.
So I'm going to start winding up because I know you have places to be. What's exciting you right now? So I know that you've already alluded that you have some kind of online academy that feel free to plug away, but do tell us more.
Yeah, I've got, it started with a mailing list, which is free and can be found on my website, Yasmin Stuart Equine Physio.com. The mailing list is called Modern Centaurian, and that really started as a movement for, I meet a lot of disempowered people who, when they really boil down to it, they feel and recognize a lot more about their horses than they give themselves credit for, and have maybe found themselves disempowered or outsourcing validation to other professionals. And that's left them feeling a little bit like they've done a disservice to themselves and their. So Modern Centaurian was really a way to empower a combination of evidence-based intuition. So we can look at the research, and then we also have to recognize that us and our horses are deeply individual. And this was just as a way to put free resources out there for people with like theory, sort of train your eye things, bodywork training, and different sort of things that they can do with their horses that help them to feel fulfilled with their horses whilst also supporting. So that is a weekly-ish email, which has a video in it, a journal prompt, a quote, and also like some free resource that I have looked at, whether that is a podcast or a blog post or sometimes a book as well. So just this is what I've been reading and this is why it's related. And from there, I have put together the Modern Centaurian Academy, which is really for building a community of like-minded people feel empowered in the equestrian space with evidence bases supporting their mission, helping us to be nicer to our horses whilst also supporting. And if my goal with this is obviously supporting horse well-being, but if more people can just reflect on the relationships that they have with their horse and recognize how absurd and abstract and incredible that is, then that's a job well done. If I can encourage you to move more slowly with your horse and just appreciate it, then that is the job for me. So yeah, I've got the email, the academy. The academy gets access to everything that I do online. So any course that I do will be given to my academy members. I only do lifetime access currently. So you buy lifetime access and you get access to everything for life. But in and around that, I will also do a little pop-up course for the Academy member. But if you don't want to be part of the Academy but are interested in body work techniques or other, these can all be found out about on my website and all through my mailing list.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
So before we wrap up, what's your vision for the future?
Oh God, that's a mean one, Ross.
I know, I didn't even prep you for this.
No, you did not. My vision for the future would be, I think, coming back to the vision of the Modern Centaurian Academy of just, can you recognize how cool it is that we have interspecies, us and our horses or other animals? And that's cool. Like, we don't even speak the same language, and yet we can still recognize our own needs. If that is all that happens in the equestrian sphere, I think it will be a much nicer place to be.
Agreed.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. That's a cool vision of the future. I like that.
We'll leave that one in
Thank you,
everyone's
guys.
minds.
Yeah.
Right. So, Yasmin, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you again to all our listeners for tuning in. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode of the Little Horse Big Conversation podcast. So until then, goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.